Happy Thursday, everyone. I'm Jeff Marks, Senior Portfolio Analyst at Action Alerts Plus, and I'm standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with Jim Cramer. Jim, we got to get into these markets today because the key headline going on right now is CPI. And CPI is the biggest measure of inflation, up 0.6% in May. That was a little bit hotter than expected, yet we're seeing stocks rally to record levels. What's going on here?
Well, I think that this was one of the most, let's say, anticipated numbers. I mean, even the lead story in the Times was, it's going to be hot, okay? So what happens is people stay on the sidelines until they see the number. And then you start thinking to yourself, okay, whoever made these stupid projections was way too low, so what do they really matter? The number's hot. We all know it's going to be hot, so big deal. You yawn and you buy. So you've got this pent-up demand going into the number. The number's bad, just like you figure it's going to be bad, and then you buy. And what's interesting is they're buying stocks that actually they should be selling if you really believe that there's a lot of inflation, like the drug stocks. And we were talking before. The drug stocks are being hand over fist bought. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, now, we think that could probably be discounted valuations, right? These stocks, a lot of them have been beaten up. Year to date, they've lagged now, except, of course, of the Biogen and Eli Lilly of the world.
Look at, Bristol Myers, which you talk about, which a lot of people didn't really like the quarter. I mean, the stock is very low multiple. Pfizer's low multiple, and Pfizer has a big gap where they have a lot of really a lot of stuff. They have big patent cliffs, but they have so much cash they can go buy companies and really make a difference. Like I was looking to, I happen to. I'm not saying this is going to get a bid from Pfizer. But I had Biohaven on this week, and I've done Biohaven is Nurtec. I took that this morning, which is their drug for migraine, and this is just one of like 10 companies that they could buy in order to be able to build up where their patent cliff is. So I think Pfizer's gotten cheap. We own so many drug stocks. I have no desire to do another, but this group is undervalued.
Now, I just want to hit back on inflation real quick, because we dig through the numbers for Action Alerts Plus for our subscribers. And one thing that really stuck out to me was used cars and how much those prices are going up.
Ford Motor is a huge beneficiary of used cars. So you take a look at a situation, and this is how it works. You've leased a car for 3 years, and then you don't want it back. Well, I mean, Ford can sell that for more than it put it out for, more than it was purchased. One of the reasons why Ford's bottom line is going to be so good is because they directly benefit from the dramatic increase in used trucks because there are not enough trucks. It's just a fantastic situation for Ford, one of our large positions. And I just think you have to, even though we trimmed some because it got too large, this is when you want to try to play what's going up, play Ford.
Yeah, and that trim, it was really about portfolio discipline. When you have a stock up as much year to date as Ford is, already our largest position, it just gets to be too big of the portfolio.
Right, and this is just pure portfolio management. Stephanie Link, who used to work at your job, she and I used to constantly battle over this, where I would say, let it run. And she would say, look, that's not what we can do. Remember, we can't just become the Ford fund. Now, we're far from doing that, but that's because we have this discipline that makes it so that can't happen.
Now, it wouldn't be a regular day if we didn't get into any Reddit stocks, and GameStop reported last night. Sales were pretty good. They also announced some new hires for the C-suite, new CFO and CEO, both from Amazon. Now, it's still pretty hush-hush what their new strategy with Ryan Cohen as chairman is going to be, but you've vocalized what you think their plan should be. What is that again?
Look, I would like them to be a crypto bank. We have all these different crypto, and there's going to be far more, okay? And I would, right now they're in the shadows. If you knew that there was an actual bank where you could go to where someone behind the counter would explain which ones, and you got registered with a charter with the government, I think you'd be a monopoly on this business. Now, I have suggested these things. I don't talk to General Sherman, who's now left the company. I don't speak to Ryan Cohen, but it's a natural. Now, my initial idea was to give away the games, but Microsoft's got such a good program for subscriptions. But I'm sticking by my crypto because it would send the stock to the moon. Here's the issue. They got to keep selling more stock because they need to reinvent the company. The more stock they sell, the more money they can reinvent the company with. So you got very smart people. This is a virtuous circle. They're raising capital. the more money they raise, the more likely they can be a company that's actually worth 22, 23 billion. Now, the people from Wall Street Bets, they hate me, and I don't mind, but I like discourse. I mean, I like to be challenged, but not challenged physically and not challenged in ways that are about things that happened years ago that didn't really happen, that have been taken back and whatever. But I genuinely think that there's a path for GameStop to go higher. And I've offered it. And if they take it, I think it's a very inexpensive stock.
And we know that they need to reinvent themselves because we listen to Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick all the time. And what he says is that all the game sales, they're going digital. Now, GameStop can have the hardware, the new consoles, but it's a digital story.
I mean, it was a good quarter, but that cycle's almost over. And what I don't get here is why people don't understand they are going to continue to do these as Adam Aaron did. They're going to keep raising money. So eventually it's going to be hard to keep it up until we find out what they're going to do. But if they leak my plan, which I'm sticking by the way, and the reason I'm doing that is part because last night we talked about Tether. And I am very worried about Tether, which is this, interaction means that that is not backed up by what I thought they were. And what I'm really concerned about is, let's say the PRC decided, you know what? We got to crack down on this. There's too many things happening that make it so we've lost control of our own people. Now remember, they've cracked down for religious freedom. Why wouldn't they crack down and say we cannot have Bitcoin in this country, unregistered people making a lot of money? Look at what they've cracked down on people who run Alibaba. So I think that there's a very much of a chance that the PRC wakes up and says, you know what? We've had it with Bitcoin. If that's the case, then Tether would be in a lot of trouble.
I want to get more on your thoughts on Tether in a moment, but first, let's just touch on some other Reddit stocks that are some newer names that we saw big moves in yesterday. Cleveland Cliffs and Clean Energy. Okay. What do you think drew them to those two?
I'm going to talk tonight on Mad Money about how they're not meme stocks. Clean Energy is a company that I used to put on all the time. It was, by the way, it was a Boone Pickens company. And they now have it's kind of a recycled natural gas company, RNGs. We're going to talk about this. This is renewable natural gas. It's basically a way to be able to burn a very low carbon fuel, not as good as green hydrogen, which is Plug Power, okay, and Linde, by the way. But they are a very good company whose time has finally come. I had them on 12 years ago. It was way too early, but they've got joint ventures with some really good companies. Clean Energy is real. Cliffs sells at 5 times earnings. I had them on not that long ago, and I said, how can this sell at 5 times earnings when there's really only them and Nucor and some U.S. steel? I mean, there's not going to be a flood of steel imports into our country. Biden's not going to let that happen. Now, we like Nucor because, frankly, Nucor's got a great balance sheet, and Nucor can have a multi-year move. But I have to admit that Cleveland Cliffs, they can continue to fix up their balance sheet. So it's not a meme name as much as people recognizing, well, why is this at 6 times earnings? It's just too inexpensive. When I think of a meme name, I think of a company that on a lot of circumstances, a lot of different metrics, is wildly overvalued. I think that Cleveland Cliffs is wildly undervalued.
Let's hit on another stock today that the market is saying is undervalued, and that's RH, the old Restoration Hardware. That stock is on the move today after reporting earnings last night, and they just absolutely blew away expectations.
Yeah. Gary Friedman talks a lot in that conference call, in his excellent shareholder letter too, about how it's not a store. Okay, it's galleries, but it's really a museum. It's a architecture. It's all different things, but it's basically made it so it's an experiential club. We're members of it. It's a membership club, and we bought a house with crypto. I've made it clear that we bought the place with crypto, and get a nice hit on that, thank you. And we just basically outfitted the whole thing with RH. And I always send Gary Friedman the pictures, but if you look at their catalogs, you see that they're far more. If you go to the gallery, they're restaurants, they're yachts, they're homes, they're mansions. They're just so exciting. And I heard that they might be doing one in Bethlehem, PA. Wow. You start hearing, well, what are they going to do? And it's like kind of like Disney. It's like, wow, they might put one up here, they might put one up there. And Gary is a genius. very self-effacing genius, but a lot of people feel he's a braggart. Just the opposite. He's incredibly humble. The reason why some people think he's prideful is because he compares himself to Bernard Arnault, and Arnault is the richest man in the world. He talks about Frank Gehry and architecture, but these are just reference points so you can understand him. They help me tremendously to understand why RH is not a furniture store. RH is an experience, and he's brilliant, and I love the guy. I just do. I love him.
I'm so glad that you mentioned Gary Friedman's shareholder letters, because I know from working for you for years, they're must-reads. And I remember the one that he had last year when he actually quoted Bernard Arnault, and he talked about how luxury goods are the only business where you can have luxury margins.
Yes, that's what, and this was, he's got scale and luxury. He has this great moment in the call where he says that all these other stores were all basically born on third base. Well, he didn't use that analogy. But he's been able to start from the bottom and raise price, and do it. And it's worked. And this membership plan that he has is so great. But by the way, if you're coming to New York, go to the rooftop.
Oh, they're unbelievable.
It's fantastic. My daughter did a gigantic Instagram spread. It is. It's probably one of the most gorgeous things. And then he's developed, he's got the hotel next to him, and he's got guest houses. He basically gives you ideas of how to do things. You see them. And, I mean, for instance, we have a backyard that's our age. Well, we saw it. We saw what he did. And we said, oh, we'll buy that stuff. Look, my daughter buys West Elm, which is really, really good stuff. But my wife buys RH. And if she buys RH because their stuff is the best. We put up these lights that he has, and I take a picture of the lights, and I said, this is just more genius. It's genius, and it's genius in the form of things that will make your place look better.
All right, and now back to Bitcoin and Tether. Now, Bitcoin, it's making a nice move higher ever since El Salvador announced that they would accept Bitcoin as legal tender. But you did a huge piece on Tether last night. So you usually don't talk about crypto too much on Mad Money. What made you talk about Tether?
My friend Tim Massid from law school penned a piece for Bloomberg about how he was worried about Tether, worried that it's this company, by the way, that is kind of like you use them as an intermediary to buy, and it's also you can use them to get leverage. But what's most important about them is that they have a balance sheet that is opaque. And Tim doesn't like that. Tim has said, look, they have a page that shows you that they own some commercial paper and this, that, but they don't tell you whose paper. They don't tell you what they have. And so he compared it to Lehman Brothers. Now, I was adamant that Lehman was in big trouble, but I had no idea how much trouble they were really in. So when I see someone analogize to Lehman, I get very scared. So I had Tim on, and in order to be able to have him on to explain the risks, we explained the risk first and then had Tim on, because he just says, look, you got to have, this is one of the biggest balance sheets, one of the top 10 banking institutions, and we know nothing about them, and he just doesn't like that. Look, there's going to have to be some regulation, and I know there's a lot of people out there who don't want any regulation for Bitcoin, but when you start having it being in a 401k, when you start having it so that it's offered as legal tender in El Salvador, you're going to attract a Gensler. You're going to attract, Tim Massid just was the head of the CFTC. I mean, and this guy's a brilliant guy, and he's worried. So if he's worried, I'm worried.
Yeah, and I think transparency in a $60 billion market, I think that's the least that you can ask for.
Right. Let's just have it. Show us what you have. Get a real auditor in there. I know they think their auditor is good, but let's just get someone to make it so that we absolutely are certain that they're fine, and that the commercial paper they have is good commercial paper, and that the loans they have is good. And New York, they're not allowed to be in New York State, Tether. And that's because the AG sued them because of this opacity. So let's just open the kimono, and then I'll feel much better about Tether. I do not, the Bitcoin places that I buy, I went and they don't use Tether.
And that's all part about doing due diligence. Yes. All right, Jim, we're going to move on to our Action Alerts Plus show shortly. But before we do that, I want to tease one of the stocks that we're going to talk about, and that's Boeing. In the news today, we're reported that they might see a huge order from United Airlines. We're talking 100 planes up to 150. We also saw Southwest place an order earlier this week What are your current thoughts on
My
Boeing?
thing is that people are starting to say, wait a second, maybe I can get a good deal in Boeing right now. I might not get a good deal in a few more months, or that China's about to certify Boeing. But I think what really matters is this is travel coming back. Gary Friedman in his RH letter says, listen, we're about to have a roaring 20s moment. If he thinks we're going to have a roaring 20s moment, well, that means there's going to be a lot of travel. And there's just not enough planes if we do have a roaring 20s moment. That's great for Boeing. If Boeing could execute better, the stock could go to 400.
And one thing we've been telling our subscribers is that with oil as high as it is, it actually makes economic sense for these airliners to upgrade their fleets.
I mean, one of the things that these companies, that Boeing did, was make its planes far more energy efficient, betting that price of jet fuel would go up. Instead, it plummeted. So it was one more reason that you didn't need to buy planes. Well, now it's coming back. So there's a lot of secular tailwinds and cyclical tailwinds that are making so that Boeing's a good stock. I do not believe the quarter's good. I've said that many times. Because these are orders. They are not, they're not writing big checks. But there is going to come a time when there's so much commerce that Boeing does well. Airbus right now is doing a better job.
All right,
Execution.
and we'll pick up the conversation on our Action Alerts Plus video right after this. We'll leave it there for today. I'm Jeff Marks for Action Alerts Plus, and we'll see you tomorrow.